Please let's welcome Oluwole Kayode to the stage as he discusses on this topic. Please, a round of applause for Oluwole Kayode.
So my name is Oluwole Kayode, as you mentioned, but I'll be speaking on the empowering underserved market Onchain. She mentioned underserved. You mentioned underserved, sorry. So I'll be speaking on underserved market, empowering underserved market Onchain. Before I start, last year when Battle spoke about attracting prosperity to Africa, I think I was somewhere around there. Okay. Can you guys hear me now? Thank you. So last year, Battle spoke about attracting prosperity to Africa, and he asked the question, what stores the attraction of prosperity to Africa? Then I answered. I talked about the vicious cycle of poverty, where you start from low productivity, you move to low income, from low income, you move to low investment, then all the way back to low capital. The cycle just keeps continuing. The simple way to understand it is that when you are poor, keep getting poorer. And today, it feels like a full circle moment for me to come and talk about how to empower underserved market, especially through the blockchain. So we already know that the transformative power of the blockchain has changed our world. It's gradually changing it. How do we use the power of the blockchain to empower the underserved market? How do we use the transparency, the composability to drive real economic value in the real world? Underserved market. When I talk about underserved market, there's a synonym for it. I called it Africa. We all know Africa is the most underserved market in the world. And how does it work? We lack capital for basic infrastructures. There's limited funding for small-scale enterprises. Let me not bore you with the facts, but there's one thing we need to know. FSDA has estimated that there's a $300 billion gap in the funding market for small-scale and medium enterprises. In the next 6 years, that's by 2030, our urbanization rate will increase by 50%. This, in essence, means that there will be increased stress on our current infrastructures. So how can we use the blockchain to bridge this funding gap? What are the things that we can do? Serving the underserved market. There's this popular statement that we say about banking the unbanked. And I think the blockchain has really excelled in that, especially in terms of payment. We've solved so many issues, especially in cross-border payments, using stablecoins, transfer money from one part of the world to the other. But how do we leverage this to drive economic value in our environment, in our country, in our underserved market, Africa? This brings us to two major factors. The number one is retail investors, and number two is RWA. By retail investors, what do I mean? A very simple way to understand this is there are two types of investors, the retail investor and institutional investors. If you're an institutional investor, you have unlimited capital, maybe not necessarily unlimited, but you have a large pool of capital to invest in different types of assets. So you have enough leeway to move markets, to make choices that you want. But with retail investors, your capital is limited. However, we can leverage retail investors to bridge our funding capital. How? We need to understand that in the past few years, the significance of retail investors, especially in the equity market, has drastically increased. Over 52% of the current equity market in the USA is being controlled by retail investors. How can we use this power to attract capital to our underserved market? I've spoken about USA. This is where RWA comes in. What is RWA? RWA is called real world asset on the blockchain. An RWA is an asset, either tangible or intangible, that has intrinsic value that can be represented on-chain. A very good example is this all that we're currently using. Of course, the organizers of this event must have paid a reasonable amount of money to use it. So if we're going to bring this all on-chain, we have to represent the digital rights or the rights of this asset. We have to bring it on-chain, yes. So Other examples of RWA could be real estate, agricultural farms, cargo ships, transportation, anything that has intrinsic value and can generate reasonable revenue. So how can we use this as a bridge to fund our capital deficit in Africa? I'm going to be making some examples of how people in other world are being able to use RWA to attract capital to their capital markets. I've already mentioned that RWA are tangible and intangible assets that have intrinsic value that can be represented on chain. And the current TVL by TVL I mean total value locked of RWA is $6.4 billion. So it is not a market that we can neglect. And by 2030, right, according to McKinsey and Company, the market cap for RWA will be over $2 trillion. So it's a market we really want to take a slice of. So how can we use RWA and retail investors? Like I said, you remember I mentioned that there are two major ways or two major factors that comes in hand when we want to empower our underserved market, through using retail investors and RWA. So how do these two come together to help our markets? The first one is by diversifying our financial sector. RWAs can diversify our financial sectors by serving as an alternative to traditional banks. A very good example is Mantrachain. Goldfinch. I don't know if anybody knows Goldfinch. Goldfinch is a decentralized private credit company. And what they do is they use the liquidity on the blockchain to fund companies in the real world. In the last 4 years, they've disbursed over $100 million worth of loan to companies in underserved markets, especially in Nigeria. The beautiful story about the company is that when they started the company, one of their major users was a Nigerian. One of the major reasons that they built the company was a Nigerian who runs a tech company and he couldn't access capital from traditional banks. So that way, Goldfinch bridges the gap in our financial sector, especially for underserved markets. Second way is by supporting urban development. Here, like I mentioned earlier, urban development in Africa is going to, urbanization in Africa is going to be increased by 50% by 2030. This in essence means that our social infrastructure and amenities, we have to go through increased stress. They are not already, enough anyway. So how can we use RWAs to increase them? Very good example is Mantrachain. The last couple of months, Mantrachain has tokenized over $500 million worth of real estate. Now, I'm going to leave it to your imagination. Imagine if $500 million worth of tokenized real estate is done in Lagos State. Maybe I shouldn't get too ambitious. Let's just say $50 million of real estate. You can imagine what it will do to our real estate market. And the good thing is, on the other side, the people that are funding this project will get real yields. That is, the two parts, the economic value is being driven, and retail investors are getting paid at the same time. This brings me to the third point, which is generating yield through value creation, not speculation. Before I explain that, please take a look at this NFT. The name there is Great Giraffe. 2021, I bought it with about 1 soul, and a few days later, it completely lost all its value. And I had to message Dave on Discord, bro, we lost. What's going on with our project? I know there's a joke online about when a project rocks and you have to go and meet the dev and tell him not to give up. It's actually my lived experience. I went through it. Then I told him, what are we going to do? Then he asked me if I had any ideas, like as if we implemented the project together. Anyway, I'm talking about making money from speculation now. How do we change that to making money from creating real value? Using RWAs. A very good example of that is ST protocol. ST protocol tokenizes real estate properties and lets people invest for as low as 50 USDC. So imagine instead of using my 1 soul to buy this NFT, then I could have invested in ST protocol. And the good thing is, truly, with speculation, there is a lot of volatility. I could get a lot more money. But with a reward asset, my capital will be preserved, and I'll get reasonable yield. Say about 10 to 15, maybe APY, but since my capital will be preserved. And on the other part, I'll be contributing to driving economic value in the real world. So you can see how RWA comes in handy here. So how do we create an RWA? Like I said, RWA are assets that have intrinsic value that can be represented on-chain. The first thing you want to do is to choose your asset. A very good example could be, let's say, a hotel. Let's say a hotel is worth about $1 million, and we want to tokenize it. Let's use it as a very good example here. So now, we identify a hotel as our asset, and we want to tokenize it. The second thing is to go through the legal frameworks. How does this work? Because these assets will be represented on-chain, we need to codify how the digital rights work. The metadata of the hotel, things like how old it is, the revenue it generates per month or quarterly or yearly, that has to be in our information. So after going through the legal part, we want to go through compliance and KYC. And the good thing, there's a lot of progress with RWAs in Nigeria currently. About 2 crypto companies received their license to run digital assets company. I think just 2 weeks ago. And the Lagos State is currently in the process of tokenizing some lands and real estate. So there's a lot of progress there if you are considering that. So after you are done with compliance, you decide if you want to do KYC or no KYC, the next step is fractionalization. Like I said, if your hotel was worth $1 million and you want to fractionalize it into, let's say, 1,000 fractions, that in essence means a fraction worth $1,000, right? So now, this way, if you are a retail investor who has limited amount of cash, you can invest in fractions of a hotel and be able to get yield from the revenue that a hotel generates, let's say quarterly or yearly. Then the next thing, tokenization platform. There are different types of platform that you can use. By platform, I mean blockchain. You want to use blockchain that supports enterprise-grade applications. A very good example is Kaya. That's low latency, that's support for account abstraction. So if you are dealing with a lot of retail investors, you are definitely dealing with people who are not familiar with the blockchain. So you want to make their onboarding as easy as possible. And it has EVM equivalence. So if you have been bidding on Ethereum before, or you are looking to integrate with Ethereum protocols, it becomes way easier for you. Then the next thing is you develop your smart contract. You write the code that enables the tokenization of your assets. You include the details of your assets, such as the revenue to generate. You want to calculate the amount of value that each fraction will give you back at the end of a certain duration. Then the next thing is to mint your asset and tokens. You create your digital token and represent the ownership of this asset, like I've said before. Then you integrate it into the market. There are 2 ways you can integrate into the market. You can go through the primary or private way, where you mint your asset and you market to only your investors, either through auction or through private sales. Then secondly is you can integrate secondary market at the end of it. This way it gives your asset more composability. You can leverage, let's say, a fraction of a hotel. This is a basic example now. If you bought a fraction of the hotel and you have it on chain, you could leverage it if your supplier or the people or the people who created the contract included it in the contract that you could market it in the secondary market. So this way you can use your fraction of the hotel to actually do other things online, like staking or lending. So this way we drive more value into each fraction of the asset. Then finally, you want to go through ongoing management. You want to ensure that the assets that you tokenize is in the perfect condition. Then you want to include certain technologies that help you ensure that there's enough data that's being transferred from your assets to the blockchain. You can do that through the use of Chainlink proof of reserve as technologies that you can integrate into your real world assets that helps you transfer data on chain. And finally, we've talked about the underserved market. We've talked about the retail investors, and how RWA can bridge the gap between capital and underserved markets again. So without, anyway, all of these are very good innovations, but without the cooperation of the government and the necessary regulatory body, especially the XCC, we are not going to be able to use RWA to patch the financial and digital revolution of Africa. Thank you so much.